I'll call the Ayer Executive Buy Board to order for Tuesday, November 15th. Due to the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, in accordance with Chapter 22, the Acts of 2022, suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, public bodies otherwise governed by the open meeting law are temporarily relieved from the requirement that meetings be held in public places, open and physically accessible to the public, so long as measures are taken to ensure public access to the body's deliberations through adequate and alternative means. This meeting will be live on Zoom. The public may participate remotely by joining Zoom meeting ID number 854-0032-4335 or by calling 929-205-6099. For additional information about remote participation, please contact Carly Antonellis, Assistant Town Manager at ATM at air.ma.us or 978-772-8220 extension 100 prior to the meeting. All right, excellent. Welcome, everyone. So first item on the agenda was the meeting minutes, but there was an email that is going to be delayed until the next meeting. So we have proper time to evaluate those. So the first item we'll go over is town finances and budget status updates.
Well, Mr. Chair, I'll go first just briefly on the budget schedule front. The rate review committee, as everyone knows, has started to meet. Tonight is the public hearing on the solid waste rate recommendations with the select board. Also tonight is the tax classification hearing with the assessors for tonight. We're also going to be having our first capital planning committee meeting on Thursday at 5 to start that process. And then later on under item 5, we'll talk about briefly, but coming up for December 1st will be the budget directive for the preparation for the FY24 budget. So on the schedule front, things are moving forward. I don't know if Fred or Barbara have any updates on town finances or the budget.
No, only thing I want to say is that the balance sheet's been submitted for the certification of free cash. The tax recap is ready to be submitted after tonight's classification hearing, and I am currently working on the Schedule A. That's what I have.
Okay, thank you.
I just did a quick review of collections. We're just winding down the November real estate collections and personal properties. They seem on target to last year. And I did just a quick report. I always do in general. Overall revenues remain on target compared to prior years.
Excellent, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay.
Anything else for the update? No? All right. Item number 4 on the agenda for this afternoon, review of financial policies, proposed revisions, updates, and next steps to completion.
Mr. Chair,
Mr.
and we have the shared screen prepared. I know we made a lot of progress last meeting, and I apologize that it ran a little long and we ran out of time. So we ended on page 15. What I propose, Mr. Chair, is that there was a couple final points. We start where we left off on page 15, and then we can discuss sort of next steps, or do a very quick refresher of the topics we touched upon last time. Does that seem like a plan? Okay.
That works for me.
All right, and Carly, thank you for putting this up on the shared screen. Just a reminder, sort of the yellow is areas that we discussed as updates. In the blue, the light blue, are areas where we need to make a decision or some further input. So we ended on page 15, which we were talking about capital, which is timely. In the blue here, capital expense A capital expense is an asset with an initial individual cost, or in certain cases, a cumulative cost of more than $10,000 and an estimated useful life in excess of 2 years. That's what the policies have said since they're in place. I just put this in blue for the buy board. Do we need to increase the dollar threshold or adjust this at all? I don't know what folks' thoughts are on that.
I guess I'll go first. My thought is that we should increase it. I think we're, as an organization, doing well utilizing single year budget increases in the operating side. And then, I think the initial fear or the initial mindset back 15, 20 years ago was when your budget got increased, that was your baseline for the next year. We've been very proactive to put these one-time items in the operating budget. And then strip that out for the next year with back to a normal baseline. I would be in favor of increasing this to 20,000 myself.
I was thinking 25.
Oh, yeah, 25. It's a good round number. I like 25.
Yep.
I think it makes sense to increase it to 25. Okay.
Yeah.
That works for me.
Then down below section 2.1, so section 2 talks about non-exempt or regular debt. And then 2.1, the town shall appropriate an amount of money annually that equals 8% of the town's proposed operating budget to the capital expense fund. Implementing this practice is subtle because the principal and interest for bonded expenditures have minimal impact on the current year, but significant impact in the future years. And again, I highlighted this more for the issue of the 8%. Do we want to keep that? Do we want to adjust that?
I think that you want to keep it at least 8 unless you want to raise it, because the bond rating companies like to see that you have a policy for your reserve. So it's a good thing for you. If you can go down on that, that might generate a question or a negative.
Do we know where we're at right now? What percentage? By chance? No.
Not off the top of my head, no.
Yeah, I don't know. To Fred's point, obviously, I don't think we should go below 8%. I think the question is, do we want to increase that? And Barbara, to your point, I don't unfortunately have that right at my fingertips.
Yeah, I don't think we track that
Yeah.
every year. And with that, I would be fine keeping it at the 8%.
Yeah, I agree, keeping at 8% until the goal's really met fully, and there's no point in changing it.
I would agree. I just wanted to flag it since we were doing the review. Okay, going down to page 16, let's see. At the bottom, so we get to the question under the capital finance. There are 2 areas that are highlighted blue that has to do with, threshold. So a non-exempt or regular debt articles with an expense less than 350,000, and an exempt or debt exclusion debt articles with an expense equal to or greater than 350,000. And I know we changed number 2 to 350,000. I think it was in 2018 or 2019, we went to 350,000 up from 250,000. But I don't know what folks' thoughts are on these thresholds.
Does DOR have a recommendation on that threshold? I guess that would be
That's a
my
good
question.
Sure they do. We can find that.
Yeah,
I'm assuming it would probably be in some proportion to the size of the budget.
Yep.
Okay. I mean, looking at the requests that we have in, having tallied the capital planning for Thursday's meeting, like for this year at 350,000, we have 4 items that will end up as a debt exclusion. If we raise that to say 450, then one of those goes away. So it's kind of in that middle area where it slows, I don't know, fringe projects where they're not ginormous in price, but they're just big enough that I think we might run into some issues trying to get the ballot box, the two-way funding on it. I think it should be increased. I don't know what it should be increased to, and I would defer more along the lines of what DOR would recommend.
Why don't
I
we-
just think that at 350,000, that just almost seems like you're gonna be borrowing every year.
Yeah,
I think there's a lot of debt already. A little bit higher, you might not have to borrow every year.
Yeah. I mean, we have some debt that's going to be falling off this year, which I think maybe talk about at another meeting, but that 350,000, we raised it 50,000 last time. But I agree. We're in a situation where we don't necessarily need a debt exclusion for something that minor.
yeah. So like one of the talking points Robert and I have had is the request for the painting of the water tank on Washington Street. Like that in its price point would be a debt exclusion, which is going to be a very hard sell on two fronts.
I see. Yeah. Yeah. I like the idea of checking with DOR, see if there's any standard
Yeah,
timelines.
why don't we do that so we can at least get that information?
Okay.
And then with that, we could come back to these thresholds, because we are in a unique situation, I would argue now, based on all the points that were just raised. And on page 17, the investment policy. So historically, the entire investment policy was in the financial policies. And as Barbara flagged from the beginning on recommendation, she has received, because it changes annually rather than, and it's subject to review, rather than putting it in the policy itself, is have a statement like this that speaks to the fact that there is a policy, that it's reviewed and so forth. And Barbara, which I'll send to everybody, just sent me some pretty good language, I think, that could further replace what was here that she got.
Robert, I have it ready to go on the shared screen if you want.
Oh, yeah, okay, if you could pull that up. So again.
Oh my God. Oh, yeah, sorry. I
No
got
worries.
too many tabs open.
And we'll send this to everyone. So Barbara, do you want to just touch upon where you got this? And
Sure. So our financial advisor Bartholomew recommended we pull it out. And because of the fact that it's our requirement for us to actually review the investment policy together annually. And he sent me this wording.
okay,
So the suggestion was to make the reference to it, cite the laws instead of having all the laws spelled out in the main financial policy. And I have no issue with leaving it in there. It was just recommended that I bring it up. So there it is.
okay. And we'll send this to everybody. I'll send this to everybody individually.
Okay.
And I think if we go this route where we have a statement, we put clearly in there the link or where folks can access the actual policy. So as it changes, they can get to that.
Yes, that's true. I did mention that to Carly, that'd be one thing I'd want to add is a link to the investment policy and have it posted up on our website, available.
And as it said on the last piece, and it says this also, if we go back to our document, which I had in the yellow, is that it does provide that the treasurer tax collector may present and review the town's investments as requested by the finance committee or select board in an open meeting. And I think that would be true for the by board as well, sort of that last sentence.
Yeah, so we'll just add by board in there. Okay. That's what's requested here.
Then on the water and sewer shut off policy, goes page 17 and we go on to 18. The yellow is basically just updating, what the policy is doing now. And if you go down, I think on page 18. Keep going. Right, yeah, there was a blue. Okay, yeah. So the last piece, this blue, what about past due amounts being sent to lien? Why I put, Barbara had brought this up in the beginning when we started this review. There's I will say there's a final piece that DPW, I think, needs to be doing so that the treasurer's office doesn't become sort of lien central, if you will, dealing with all of that. So Barbara and I were going to meet with Dan Van Schalwick to sort of flesh out this blue point here.
Okay.
The procurement policy is pretty straightforward. Carly and I it's been updated just to reflect state law as far as the various dollar thresholds and so forth. So no major change there. The long-term debt, I think those were all of the changes. So then we went from there to procurement, which was pretty straightforward. Long-term debt, the IT acquisition and the IT policies. Then we come to the signature page. And then there were a couple of exhibits that I looked over. The one was on enterprise policy. And that included the ambulance and solid waste. And there were no changes to date on that. So that sort of concludes the major points.
Okay, so sounds like for follow-up, we have DOR for the threshold on debt exclusions. There any other pending items from the previous review that we had?
Let me just double check. So we have the follow-up with DOR from today. We have the water shut off lien piece that Barbara and I will handle with DPW. It's not a major point there. Let me just go back to from last time.
If I may, real quick, through you, Scott. I believe the other thing we were going to add in is a paragraph on cannabis money, similar to the meals and sales tax, just generally describing it and that it is general fund.
Yeah. Right, so that would be on page, Barbara's right, page 8. I had put just cannabis tax in light blue with a bunch of question marks. We had discussed last time that at a minimum, we should have something that sort of at least defines what it is. I know we had batted around. We know that it has to go into the general fund, but what it should be used for.
Yeah, and even at this point, if we at least just put it in there to define it.
Yeah, we could also, since we have a couple other open ends, we can discuss at our next meeting. I'd like the finance committee to at least be part of that conversation before we make a decision.
Okay.
Okay.
The other area we talked about last time, and I don't have a definitive answer yet, but this was on page 9 when we talked about employee compensation. And the concern that it highlighted in light blue at that time, and Scott and I have talked about this, is the COLA recommendation shall not exceed the amount of, and with question marks. And so over the last 12 years, 11 of those 12, the COLA recommendation has been 2%. There was one year there was no COLA when we were going into regionalization. And I think the challenge is with using these metrics, for example, and not that they're bad, but we talked about last time, some of the metrics, as we all know, like Social Security, and increase and so forth is gonna be high. The question became, do we put some kind of parameters on the COLA recommendation? I mean, again, the departments, we're gonna do our analysis with this. I go to the board usually in February with a recommendation. The board can recommend it on the town warrant. Of course, it's ultimately subject to town meeting on the COLA. I don't know if people had any further thoughts on that.
Robert, I think like I mentioned last time that if we limit it, it kind of like binds our hands during negotiations.
Mhm.
I mean, they already basically know what we're gonna come to anyway, so I don't know that we need to put it in writing what our negotiating strategy is necessarily.
Yeah, that's a good point, Carly.
Good point. And let me just check the other. Sorry, the other, right after that, we got into stabilization last time, and let me just check the notes here.
That was the 7% of the operating.
Right.
I think the question was because we've already achieved these,
Mhm.
if we wanted to increase them. Or just leave them the same, knowing we're already past that goal.
My thought is to be being forward thinking, even though we've already achieved those goals. We also want to build something with these policies that can go forward, depending on, that's, I guess, scales with the economic environment. I mean, and granted, yes, I hopefully we will not be depleting our stabilization fund anytime soon, but keeping a minimum in, but also being mindful of the way growth has been. It's not necessarily sustainable on the growth front, particularly since we're such a geographically small town. So I would opt to just leave it at the 7% for now. We can look, at the next review in a couple of years, we can revisit it. But I think we've achieved what the goal was beyond what the initial goal was, but I think leaving the goal in there as it is fine for now.
Okay,
I think that's fair.
me too.
Okay. Then we, just real quick. Then from there, I'm just checking, that was pretty much, the OPEB was pretty straightforward. The UDAG on page 13 is new. The reserve fund for future liabilities for compensated balances per town meeting, that was new. And then what we talked about today. So what I have is sort of outstanding for the buy board is we want to follow up on the DOR as discussed today. The second thing is the cannabis piece. We want to at least have some definition of that in the policy and have the finance committee hopefully weigh in as well. And I think we're in pretty good shape after that. What I mean by pretty good shape, what I see is the next step after this is to then obviously send this to all of the departments for their review and input. We give them a specific deadline for any, questions and input that they have. And then we would take, that would be sort of the final input phase, and then we'd convene back here and put the final version together for approval by the FinCom and the Select Board.
So on a time frame of when these would be going into place, and this is just thinking ahead to our capital process starting, we be looking to get these approved and in place before the end of the year, or would this flow over after capital is completed and recommendations are made?
I think ideally our plan was to try to get it done by the end of the calendar year. Of course, the key thing, I think we can all agree, is to get it done right. You know what I'm saying? So.
Okay. Well, just the reason why I bring it up, I think as we start capital on Thursday, we need to just make sure other members are mindful that we're proposing these changes. And that because that may impact some of the questions we have around some of the projects that are being submitted.
Okay. Yeah, let me see what we can find from DOR, Scott, and I can even prepare a 1-pager for Thursday, just saying that this is what is at least on the table. It hasn't been approved.
That sounds great. Thank you.
Because I agree with you. I think one of the challenges as the capital plan stands now, besides the scope, and all departments know that's going to get shaved back. But as you mentioned earlier, if it just say it went as quote plan, no pun intended, there's 4 debt exclusions on there, which you may be able to get through town meeting, but the ballot box, you remember the last time we had that many, what happened? So there's some work to be done. Okay.
All right.
You know what I can
Excellent.
do real quick is I can, just for next time, I'm sorry to interrupt, I'll get the debt limit so we can see where we are on the debt limit versus what we have for debt. That might make a difference on whether you decide to go for an exclusion. I'll have that information next time.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
All right. So next item on the agenda, discuss the FY 2024 budget preparation directive.
So, Mr. Chair, it's that time of year again per the budget calendar set by the Select Board. December 1st, the directive is to go out with all of the initial submissions to come in by the end of the month. I think December 30th or so forth. Again, the directive is more to get folks just the instructions for preparation for that. We've used a pretty similar model, every year, but as in every year, I wanted to put this on the agenda to see if there were any specific thoughts or any input of what people think should or shouldn't be, in that directive. There's no question, I've talked about this at the department head meetings, though we want everybody to put forward their initial budget for their needs. In the area of personnel, it's been pretty clear. I mean, we had a lot of personnel that was done just recently, and we've had a lot of personnel challenges in some of these positions have not been filled since they were approved at town meeting. And Ayer is not alone in that category. It is the municipal marketplace it's like something at least I haven't seen in 20 years, but anyway. So again, we're looking for folks to, again, prepare budget based on last year's. We ask for any one-time increases or one-time, if there's any personnel requests or so forth, to break that out with an explanatory memo on that front. I don't know if there's any other thoughts.
I mean, I think you give the same directive pretty much every year, and I think the departments have done a very good job following that.
Mhm.
Fred, with the GL changes, is there going to need to be anything on that front that changes what we send?
Or, I'm sorry, I was looking at for the DOI thing. What was the question?
Just on the budget directive, when we send it out, I think we usually spell out the jail numbers for each department
Yeah, the document will probably have to change. Yeah,
a little bit, but
Yeah.
other than that, it should be able to stay pretty similar.
yeah,
I would think.
basically the same.
Okay.
All right. Robert, any word on a finance committee meeting in the near future?
Frustratingly, no, I did talk to the moderator, actually, was it yesterday, Carly? I think it was yesterday. I saw the moderator and stressed to him two things, just concern that they haven't rescheduled since they didn't have a quorum, and that was three and a half weeks ago. I know that the chair did show up at the rate review committee. As you saw, I did invite both the chair and the vice chair to this meeting. I will let the chair know again about the capital meeting on Thursday, but I stress they really need to meet also so they can formally pick who their representatives are going to be on these other committees. We know the buy board is the chair and the vice chair of this FinCom, but on the others. So I will put another word out. I also stress there's a fifth vacancy, a fifth seat, if there's candidates. The moderator indicated he had a couple of candidates and would be talking about another selection thing, but I will stress it some more, the importance of them getting organized.
All right, thank you. Okay, moving on the agenda up to new business items for topics for future executive by board meetings. I don't have anything off the top of my head. I think as we're getting into budget season, we have enough to keep us busy.
I agree.
All right.
Agreed at this point, yeah.
Okay. So then scheduling of our next meeting.
So Carly, under our normal schedule, when would the next meeting be? Please.
December 13th.
Now, let me change. Yeah, we were doing the second Tuesday, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it would be the 13th.
I think my 2 cents is I think that would work, and with the plan for the 13th. So for the 13th, we should have from our buy board and everything on the policies buttoned up. And on the 13th, we can, touch base on that and then prepare to send it for review from the departments and the committees. That could be one item. Secondly, capital will have started to meet, so we can talk about that. And rate review is going to be shifting now to water and sewer as well. And I think we will have some preliminary information as well from Neshoba Valley Tech on the assessment, the beginning of the assessment. And I think I will check in with the superintendent at the ASRSD, not only about the assessment, but about the plan for the letter of intent on the elementary school, which they said they would be doing for January of 2023, which is less than 2 months away. So I think the 13th will work for the next meeting. I don't think we need a meeting before then.
All right, that works for me. I have my work calendar blocked.
Okay.
Okay, and with that, I'll open up to just any last minute questions or comments before we adjourn.
Nope.
No? Okay, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
I'll make the motion to adjourn. at 2:35.
I'll second.
Okay, thank you. I'll roll call the vote. Ms. Antonellis,
Aye.
Ms. Tierney,
Aye.
Mr. Aponte,
Aye.
Mr. Pomperant,
Aye.
and the chair says aye. Thanks very much for your time.